as I've explained to Peter, and I won't bag on NBN, but my internet went down on Saturday. They tell me that they'll be out on Tuesday. Then we called them and said, "Where are you?" And they said, "Oh, we've decided not to come because it's not an NBN problem." Then Kogan said to NBN, "Yeah, it is your problem. Your box is faulty." So now we're waiting to see who they pass it to this time. But we are tethered in with a system that is giving me some signal strength, but not as usual. So it's touch and go. But sound does go out, just wave and let me know. So before we head over to the questions that have come in, I thought I might share a little something with you that I found on The Guardian. Not that I read The Guardian, but I do search tree stuff on a regular basis. And it was a case in Lane Cove recently where an individual had removed 700 odd trees. And the fine for that was $200,000. And my first question is, why would you do that through the Land and Environment Court when you could get civil damages and criminal prosecution under Section 195 of the Crimes Act? And I don't know the answer to that, but it seems to me that at least there's been a reasonable penalty. It's not anywhere near as much as I would have thought that it should have been, but certainly a big enough penalty that has hurt somebody. I dare say that the person that bought the property and was paying cash probably had enough money to just pick up that as a little inconvenience.
I read the same article, Mark, and I noticed that council didn't comment further because there was ongoing matters before the court. I suspect they're also going after the owner.
The homeowner, yes. And again, I won't mention the name of the particular event promoter, but there was one in Sydney a number of years ago who cut down some trees and just considered that the penalty at that stage was just a part of having his view restored and retained. So again, when you start to get into the upper income bracket, Peter, the money boggles me. I know that the person with the largest super fund in Australia, one individual, has over $450 million in his super fund. When you think about it, that's a hell of a lot of money.
I hope he's allocated a beneficiary.
Well, it doesn't matter now because the government's going to take 17% from him regardless. So, unless, of course, he has it all set up so that it's all liquid, and the moment he dies, a fraction before he dies, it's all transferred to another party. So, again, it's the stupidity of the systems we work in. I'm forever thankful that I live in Australia because I think it's a wonderful country that offers lots of benefits, but it is also a place that's run by a whole pile of idiots and numbskulls, regardless of political persuasion. And I think we're seeing that playing out at the moment with our Prime Minister getting into trouble with the Japanese. I sit there and I think, I've done some dumb things, but I think he's better at doing it than me. So full marks to him for stuffing up. So that was one thing. And then, Peter, you mentioned an experience that you had today, and I thought I'd like to touch on that if I could. You came down yesterday to do what?
I came down on Sunday to attend the Land Environment Court on yesterday, where I was giving evidence in a matter.
And we don't need to know about the matter, but how hard was the grueling?
I answered 2 questions. So I flew all the way down here, was accommodated at my client's expense, et cetera, and I answered 2 questions. The questions were, what is your name? And I answered that successfully. And is the CV that's annexed to the joint expert report true and accurate? And I answered that one successfully as well.
Which is, I believe so. I always worry that I've made some sort of mistake, but yeah, look.
Well, I was not confident, Mark. said, yes, it is.
Yeah. This is what we call lawfare. So this is where the law is being used. So, and it's interesting because you get different parties will feel differently. And I know that there was a case recently that was heard in Sydney, and the commissioner was frustrated that the arborists weren't there. Again, you know, it's difficult to know, but yes, it does add cost, particularly when you're coming at a distance. And it does amaze me that they can't deal with these things at distance online, Peter. They did during COVID. It's just a shame that, again, the costs are there, and it's a part of, I guess, the process. One of the things that, and this wasn't a tree disputes between neighbours matter, this was a development application, as far as I understand. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, that's
So,
correct. And it's a significant development with significant sums of money involved.
Yeah. So, annoying as it is, it's only a small extra cost. And I'm amazed. I mean, if they've had a typical legal team, they're probably spending 10 grand plus a day on legals as an absolute minimum, probably closer to 20 or 25,000 a day. So the arborist isn't such
a component. We had a on-site hearing on the first day, and at that hearing I counted 34 people.
Yeah, so you know, this is a court case. It's probably going to cost somebody $200,000 or $300,000 or $400,000. And I've made these comments, and I won't mention the council, but I deal with a council periodically, and I just wonder why a lot of these things aren't dealt with smaller crowds, smaller numbers, and more amicably. But that's again this process of how things are run in these processes. And often they're politically motivated. They're not civilly motivated. So, yeah, I think that gets you a good idea that the law and trees aren't completely separated. They are occurring. We've got lots of things going on, and it's increasing in its frequency, not decreasing. So, and it's nice to see that at least parties think that trees are important enough to get a consulting arborist in, and it's nice bread and butter when it happens. Yep. Okay. Any questions before we look at the few questions that have been sent in? No? Okay, let me see if I can share my screen. I will tell it to share to infinity and beyond, and it'll hate me. So I better not do that this time because I'm running on low energy. I can do it by doing this. And I will say, you know, you get a lot of me, and the other mentors tend not to show up. Every now and again I get one flick me an email about an email that's come through. But I did see a post on LinkedIn this week where one arborist, a consulting arborist, was expressing their view of a practicing arborist and somebody else who didn't have the same qualifications. And their comments were not disparaging, but somewhat demeaning of others, and look, I'm superior. And as I looked at their responses, I thought, well, I don't agree with you either. And I think one of the things you've got to be aware of in arboriculture is there's still lots of opinion-based activity. That's something to keep in mind. Now, if I say Windows, it should say inbox, share. Okay, so first question. No, that's not the right one, is it? No, I've pushed the wrong thing into the vlog. Peter, I've put one in there that isn't correct. I have to go find where I put it. I don't know where I put it. Okay, so this is the first.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, this is the first one. It's a leaning. Don't know what's okay. A Coyrymbia gummifera, leaning against a punctata or a grey gum at Gray's Point. How do I feel about it? Well, it's moved at some stage. I'm pretty confident of that because of the level of contact. How would I feel about it? Boy, I'd want to look at the base more, and I'd be concerned about releasing the pressure by removing the punctata. I would be more content in removing the gummifera. So that's how I would feel about it. And, you know, I'm just concerned now, having said that, there are trees out there that have shifted in the ground that 20 years later are rock solid and will stay rock solid. But it's very hard to test when this is being supported by another tree.
Mark, do you see the photos? This is the question sent in by Vicky, isn't it?
Yeah.
Can you see the photo?
Yeah, I can see. Can you not see them?
We can't see the photos.
No, yeah, we can't see the photos.
Oh, okay. Hang on. Oh, I see why. Yep. Yeah. Okay.
I thought the photos were pretty interesting. So.
Yeah. Sorry. I will have to go to an infinity screen. I'm sorry. I was hoping to get away with it. Okay. Now can you see it?
Yeah.
We can see it now. Yeah.
Okay. So you've got this leaning gummifera against a punctata. Here's it from another angle.
Just to be a nuisance, Mark, is there any chance of you zooming in a bit?
Yes, not a problem. I'll zoom right into this union here. So there's direct contact here from what I can gather. Is that correct, Vicky?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, and that's what makes me feel uncomfortable. Now, it may well have been that the punctata's just grown up there and the two have had a clash, but I suspect not. I suspect at some stage earlier in the life of this tree, it's moved and rotated. And that always concerns me. And I don't know that the tree, you could prop the tree and find out, but what needs to go? Does anything need to go for a starter? Are they planning to build here or something?
They're building, and the tree is leaning over the neighbour's pool.
Yeah, look, I wouldn't be so concerned about the neighbour's pool because my view of the world is that failure is most likely to occur in inclement weather when the pool's not likely to be used. So from a risk perspective, it's still probably a tolerable risk or a acceptable risk. In terms of doing something, yeah, look, it seems to me applying to the council for consent to remove.
Base as well, we dug around in under the base. There's like a hollow in on the lower side under the base.
Yeah, look, on that basis, I would suggest that removal of the tree makes good sense, Vicky.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah.
It just, it's always a shame to see a tree go, but the punctata's got nowhere near the crown that it would normally have, and I think you may find by removing the gummifera, you might see some improvement in the punctata's crown. And there's one more shot, and this is our basal wound or basal cavity that's there. So yes, look, I'm of that view that if it's not something that needs to be retained, it's probably one that I would throw back to the council and say, hey guys, come out and make a decision. And I think most councils would say yes. I don't think this is anything here, Vicky. I just think that's just more rapid growth.
Okay.
Putting down some adaptive growth. But whoever does the job needs to obviously use some care in that removal process. And a typical process would be to reduce as much of the air as possible. And if you're listening on or you're looking in later on, reducing as much of this as possible, this side here, and putting an acro prop somewhere in here to support it just in case it wants to go completely. It just keeps control of it. Then the climber would need to work in the punctata itself. Obviously, you're not going to get an elevated work platform in there. So, yeah, I would be inclined not to argue with it.
Okay.
Going to kill somebody on probability, but good management says it's probably a prudent thing to do at this stage.
Okay, thanks very much.
And that's why it's a council decision in my mind, is they're making the final decisions. If I got there and that was moving in the ground and rocking, under the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act in New South Wales, guys, for your own areas, you'll have to check this, but Vicky's in New South Wales, so am I, so is Peter, so Kath. We have an exemption if it's dead, dying or dangerous, and I would, if it was rocking in the ground, I'd be happy saying, look, it's dangerous, it's going to damage property, it's not going to hurt somebody, and the property damage is not horrendous in my mind. So, you know, it might be a $20,000 or $30,000 repair. It'd be up to the householder to make the decision, but I'd take those photographs and it was rocking in the ground, I'd send a video to the council, and most of them will give you a response within an hour or so. Most are pretty good. Is that the same, Peter, in your end of the world in Victoria?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, dead, dying or dangerous. Well, yeah, it's take a photo.
Yeah, and the problem with that dead, dying and dangerous, and I deal with a SEP, the infrastructure SEP, fairly regularly, is that dangerous is not any sort of danger, but a real and appreciable danger, but an appreciable risk, yeah. And in fact, we've got some cities now or some local government areas now specifying imminent as the requirement. That is, it must be actively failing. Otherwise, you can wait 2, 3, 4 weeks for the application to go through. It's not that, it doesn't need to be done that quickly. And again, doesn't hurt to send off a quick report with the images or a link to the video so that they can see things and make a decision. So, yeah, that's what I'd do, Vicky. I'd
so just do a tree application, just an application for tree removal, but would I need to do a risk report or not really?
No, I just simply say there's evidence the tree has possibly moved in the past as basal injury, and the tree is leaning directly on an adjacent tree. And look, I've already said to you, I'd have concerns about removing it without providing some form of prop to it if I was an arborist.
Yeah.
So I think that's a fair, and I think most here's the other experience. Most council arborists are very risk averse. And the reason they're very risk averse is they're taught to be that way because council's got big pockets, and nothing that a solicitor would like more than find somebody with big pockets they can come and get some money from. So it's easier to get money out of a council than it is to get money from a consulting arborist.
Yeah.
So
okay, thank you very much.
What you're doing is you're flicking it onto the council, and then they're realistically at that point assuming the risk, and because they're quite risk averse, they're almost certainly going to say yes. I can't think of a council that would say no to that.
Yeah. Okay, that's, thank you very much.
That's that one. Peter, I don't know what I did to the other one. There was your 2 images.
Yeah, I sent an email through as well. Pretty sure I sent it to...
Didn't move it. That's why. It's okay. I've got it there. Yep, thank you. And I will blow these up for you. Okay, so here we've got a strangler fig, and I don't know which one it is. Virens, Watkinsoniana, what is it, Peter?
I don't know. I've not actually seen it. This was a request for a report which didn't go ahead. They've actually moved the building away, far enough away from the tree so that we won't need a report. But I thought it was an interesting question.
So when it engulfs a dead tree, how do you measure the DSH? The answer is around the outside edge. It's artificial. You could actually subtract from it the inside edge, work out the biomass, and go back to a square meterage. But it's a fig. I mean, I think you just discuss it as a unique situation. I don't think the standard has looked at that in any way, but mathematically you could calculate it back to a solid trunk. So you would take the outside circumference, the inside circumference, the hollow, or estimate the width of the dead part, and you could do that if you want just by using a big pair of calipers, or essentially making yourself a big pair of calipers to measure the diameter of the internal trunk, the dead tree. Subtract the area of the big one from the area of the little one and figure out what that is in square meterage, work that, or square centimeters, and work that back to through the pi r squared equation, and you'll get there. So it is a good question, and you know, the standard's not aimed at being specific or prescriptive. The standard, a lot of what the standard's got is about trying to come up with a process, and the process is, what do we need in terms of nominal root zone or notional root zone? What are we going to protect? How much can we get away with? How much can we offset? Those are the sort of considerations. And if you use it, and someone was saying to me the other day, they had some problems with developers who were simply saying, look, we're going to be closer than 12 times trunk diameter. We're going to be 8 times trunk diameter. The tree needs to go. And I think that is not the intent, but it's often what happens as a result of that flawed approach to the standard as being prescriptive rather than a process. So I think, you know, any reason, and you know, for me, I'd probably just estimate that and say, look, you know, it's got a trunk equivalent to maybe a 40 centimeter diameter tree or a 50 centimeter diameter tree, and just work from an estimate. And I often do that with things like lagostromias, where you've got 5 and 6 stems, rather than going through and, you know, measuring each one and adding it up, and it's above branches here, and, you know, do I include the diameter of the branch because allometrically it's important, or how do I do it? Well, you know, it's got an estimated trunk diameter of about 25 centimeters. And, you know, in most cases that 25, 23, 27, 29 doesn't make that much difference. Yes, we may be closer than 12 times, we may be closer than 10 times, we may be closer than 6 times. In most cases, it's not going to be the end of the world. And the next one,
the standard does canvas a number of different scenarios, you know, where there's a fork, where there's multiple stems, where there's a slope. But it doesn't actually look at this specifically. I thought it was interesting.
It's the same with how do you do a brachychiton rupestris or a Adansonia or any of those cordiciform plants with a big swelling in their stems. And yeah, I think it's interesting. I think we just got to be have some common sense. The next one is, do you think this could be sublethal herbicide poisoning? My gut level feeling is no. But that's gut level, and it's not a great photograph. So it's hard to tell the details. I see some chlorosis. I see some dead material here, and this looks like it may have some form of Lepidoptera or something associated with it. But there's no evidence of chewing on the newer materials. So I'm of a mindset that probably not a big issue in terms of sublethal poisoning. I'd be expecting a more uniform issue, unless it was just a topical thing like petrol spray or something like that. But again, more photographs may help assist in looking at that. It looks like it's a Callistemon or a Melaleuca.
Yeah, Bracteata.
Yeah, okay.
I do have some other photos, but they're not even as good as this one. So,
yep. Getting good photographs is an art, and you know, the secret is always take a lot more photographs than you need. I often get frustrated when I get back to the office and I don't have a photograph that I want. And I think, oh, you know, I'm not going to go back out there because it's not cost effective. But so over the years, I've gotten to the habit of taking a lot more photographs than I need. And I'll give you an example of that. I have only need one image for a report that I'm on at the moment. It's a significant tree in Menangle in New South Wales. They wanted to do some pruning on it, and that's the tree there. I'll wait for the image to open, guys. It is slow. I do apologize. Okay. So you can see there's been a number of failures in the past. There's a hollow in the trunk. There was concerns about the hollow. An arborist came back and said, look, we're going to do this essentially. And somebody said, look, what's your thoughts? I was engaged to write a report about it. I have some concerns, or I had some, I don't now. They've load tested these for me about that union there and a similar union out the back. Sorry, it will take time to load, guys. But there've been lots of failures. It's, you know, my guesstimate is it's probably a 70 to 120-year-old tree, something in that range. It's a perfectly fine tree, low target area in the sense that most of it's over a mulch area, although they are saying that it will eventually become 2 driveways, and my comment was at that stage they'll probably remove it. This will take some time to load, but this is them finishing off the tree, and you can see we've got fairly good winds. We've got between near gale and gale force winds going through. By the way, those of you who didn't see, yesterday someone was killed by a falling tree. Thank goodness it wasn't someone young, someone pretty, because that would have been really all over the media. I'll wait for it. It'll run right through, and then once it's run right through. It'll just be a slow process as it puts it into cache.
Mark, are you still collecting those tree deaths data?
Yeah, I've got most from the last 9 years, and we're just about ready to go back, amend the report, update the information, look at the information from the National Coroner's Information Service. So you can see it's a reasonably good wind that we've got going on. Nothing's breaking off. You know, if we start getting double those wind speeds, we're going to get some branches break, and that's what we expect to have happen. I'd rather see branches go than the whole tree. So whilst I only needed one shot, I ended up with 1, 2, and I can capture a shot, 3 shots, and I can capture a still from any of these videos. So far more than I needed for the end purpose, but that's the nature of trying to collect information.
See that one
So
branch
yes,
out there by itself that sort of sticks out by itself?
yeah,
Would you look at removing that or reducing that, or you don't think it's necessary?
Work done in cyclones in Florida suggested that overextended branches are not more likely to fail.
Yeah.
But my next comment is, if I did want something to fail, something like that failing is not going to be a problem. It's over what is currently let me see if I can go back to so it's over just a paddock area that's all mulched at the moment. That's the one you're talking about there. There was discussions as to whether that would or should come off. I suspect it will be in decline. And this branch here has gone. So that one was taken off just because most of the foliage had gone up the top here. And that was a part of root investigation. Somebody did a root investigation. The arborist wasn't there to inspect or give feedback. They came in with a hydrovac. And the net result was the bark was stripped off about 80% around every one of the roots, closer to the tree than the line where the work was going to occur in any case. So they would have been better off just coming another 1.5 meters further away and cutting. Not saying that I want to do that all the time. And where you can, dig and retain a root and thread your pipe underneath. That's certainly a better option. But yeah, it's the point of trying to keep as many photographs going as possible so that you've got something that shows what you want. And yeah, look, Peter, if you turn around and remove that, I don't think that's bad. What you will see that's a little unusual in this, and I will find it for you. Is this tree had reasonable habitat value, and you'll see that we've left a number of the stubs long rather than taking them back to a collar. And there was a discussion I had with the council arborist and the ecologist. From my side, something that's 20 centimeters long, that's 15 centimeters in diameter, by the time that rots away and breaks off, the mass is going to be really small, insignificant. So the advantage was that it allowed those to be kept. And there's one cut here that, again, arborists want to cut everything as a transverse straight at 90 degrees across. We had to get the arborist to recut so that it wasn't open to the element. We wanted it to be as upright as we could. In fact, it would have been nicer for him to have gone back almost further so that it was a roof over the top. But again, you've got to allow the animal, usually a bird in these situations, something like a black duck. Black ducks love larger cavities, and this is a larger cavity. I've got a piece of
wood duck.
Wood duck, yeah. The wood duck, the common duck that we have in the East Coast.
It's not actually a duck, Mark. It's actually a goose.
Is it really?
Yeah,
I didn't know that. There we are.
I mean, it looks like a duck, but they do roost in trees and nest in trees.
Yeah, they do, and in big hollows. And those who did study at Richmond in the earlier years, we used to have a nesting in a celtis that the local council ended up removing because it was all decayed. Of course, the celtis was only about maybe 12 meters high and smaller diameter branches. I would have just left it fail, and probably would have never failed. But again, we live in a world that is concerned, and I understand the other arborist's view is I don't want to have this risk. That's what I've got professional indemnity for. The professional indemnity is there to try and make me as objective as possible rather than running on fear. Have I acted reasonably in the situation? My view of it is, yes, I think what I've done is reasonable. That is, there's an argument for what I've done. I suspect that would have failed, although they load tested these up here for me. There's, as I said, a similar cluster on the other failed off. This one down here was a little iffy, and I got them to cut that as close as they could. They spent a 4 or 5 minutes just trimming around, getting rid of all the dead, because I'd like that one to start occluding over more, just to give more tensile strength. And perfectly, I would have preferred that back a fraction more as well. But again, my comment to the council arborist was, I don't think we need to get everything perfect in the tree. I think in reality, someone will be back in 5 or 10 years to do more work on it, or when the first house goes in underneath it, there'll be an application to remove the tree. Someone will talk to the mayor. Someone will talk to 3 or 4 councillors. Not that they would interfere in day-to-day operations of a council department, but sometimes they do. My experience is that occurrence is about 99.999% of the time. And then trees get removed, even though the tree was there when the person bought the block of land. The block of land hasn't been sold. And the hope is that the developer will turn it back to a pocket park. That's what it was going to be originally. And, you know, to the credit, the developer has done a great job. Let me see if I can get down on that page. Control. How to do that? Oh, I know. This shot here. This here is a concrete suspended section that was designed to have the least amount of impact on the roots of the tree. So it's like a speed hump. It goes up, it's tapered up. It's from what I could gather, it was 40 MPa concrete with nice meshing through it, just so that there was minimum amount of disturbance and damage. And you know, I think things like that speak credit to the developer, at least trying to do the right thing, even though they might be persuaded by the council. That's the reality. And if I look at the trees in behind here, they all had issues too. I mean, there's no such thing as a perfect tree. And to that extent, and I'd be interested to know whether this one's more useful than the other one, I've been working again on trying to figure out how to communicate log 10 thinking. As you know, it's something that's important. So I thought this might be just useful. It's only a couple of minutes, but it's a linear look at the likelihood of finding a tree that poses an unacceptable risk. What you'd have to do from just a simple term. So on a rough average, and again, it will depend on a whole pile of variables. You may get pockets where things are worse and pockets where things are nowhere near as bad, but on average, based on the number of trees and the mortality data rate for Australia, 1 tree in every 5,000 in and adjacent areas of high urban use will pose a risk that is in the tolerable range. 1 tree in every 500,000 poses a risk that's in the unacceptable range. So it's not a very common thing to see an unacceptable one. Now I'm going to go do QTRA training Thursday and Friday, and I'm sure that there'll be somebody there that thinks every 4th or 5th tree is tolerable and every 100th tree is unacceptable, because that's the way that we've been taught to think. So if we had a tree every 10 meters, that's all I'm wanting, 1 tree, 1 green thing every 10 meters to look at, and you started in Perth assessing a continuous row of trees and you're walking at 2.5 kilometers an hour, that gives you enough time to have a walk around the tree and look up, okay? And you worked a 40-hour week. This is what you'd need to do to find a tolerable and unacceptable risk tree, just to give you an idea. Okay, the first 100 meters, it's a nothingness. It's a nice, easy one. You've traveled 100 meters, you've assessed 10 trees, and you spent 2.4 minutes walking. It's easy. You get up to the kilometre. 100 trees assessed, 24 minutes walking. It's nothing. Starts to get longer when you start thinking about 10 kilometres. 10 kilometres, you've done 10 kilometres of walking, assuming no deviations. Obviously you've got that extra, but we're talking about the linear distance you walked. You've assessed 1,000 trees, that's a fair few now, and you spent 4 hours walking. So you're doing a good day's work there. You know, that's a typical day for me. I'm finished after about 4 hours in the schools and want to be back in the office doing things, because that's tiring. but you've decided to continue on, you're going to do 100 kilometers. You've assessed 10,000 trees. You spent 1 working week walking, and you haven't done a damn thing. Not a tree on average that you'll have found. So here we are at 500 kilometers. Okay, you've done the 500. You've assessed 50,000 trees. You've done 5 working weeks of walking, solid 40 hours a week. And I don't know where I can hide that, but I should be able to, yeah, but I can. And you found your first tolerable risk tree. In that distance somewhere, you would have found one on average. You could have found 2 or 3 because averages are averages, but we'd expect you to find 1 on average. There's 1,000 kilometers. Okay. You've done 100,000 trees. That's a lot of assessment. You've been 10 working weeks walking. By the way, you finish and end at the end of it all. You've got to have someone to pick you up. It's pretty hard. And now you found 2 tolerable risk trees. Okay. You're close enough, but not quite in South Australia. Okay. You finally get to walk 5,000 kilometers. You've traveled 5,000 kilometers. You've assessed 500,000 trees. You spent 50 weeks, 1 working year. You're going to get 2 weeks holiday. You're American. Okay. Sorry. Bad luck there, guys. You found 100 tolerable risk trees over that distance, and you'll have found 1 unacceptable risk tree. And you'll have walked all the way, not that you can, but we'll build an imaginary bridge all the way from Perth to Christchurch. That gives you an idea of how often you should be seeing these things. So a tolerable tree is exciting to see. An unacceptable risk tree is a real rarity. Now, unacceptable trees often happen rapidly. So straight after a storm, when you go out and look, you may see a different set of statistics again, because you've had localized rapid damage. But if you're just walking through general suburbia, if you're walking through the average person's home, you would need to assess, on an average, 500,000 trees. If you are doing that, you'd be working solid for a year. Why don't I see them very often? Because I'm lucky to do probably 10% of that in a year in terms of walking and looking at trees. So we go back to the 10% mark. There I am there. And yep, every now and then I find a tree that's in the tolerable range that I've got to write a report on. And I'd probably do 2 or 3 a year. The last 2 were not tolerable. They were broadly acceptable. And my comment was, one's actively failing. It may stop. It's on a Melaleuca citrinus. No, it wasn't. Sorry. Callistemum salignus. And I said, look, it's probably going to fail. It may not. There's an earlier partial failure that's still there 10 years later. If it fails, it's going to fail fairly slowly. It's not going to kill a kid. It's over the play equipment. Trying to explain that to parents when little Johnny's been knocked off the play equipment. Reputational risk is the bigger issue. No, it's just one of those things. Put 2 bolts in it or remove it was my suggestion. And that wasn't in that category. So it's rare for me to see a tree where I say, look, we need to take some form of action.
So,
and it should be.
How did you get that 1 in 500,000? That based on 1 in 5 million sort of kill people, or how did you get that? Yeah,
so you look at how you distribute it. If you had 100 trees, for example, in the 1 in 1, you'd have 100 deaths just from that category. So you can't have 100 trees in that category. So you end up with a proportional distribution. And we don't know what the real distribution is. So we've had to assume that the distribution is a log 10 distribution, which makes sense in terms of we don't get this huge number of fatalities. And if you've got 1 million trees that pose a 1 in a million risk, you're going to get 1 death from that in a year on average. We've got 10 million trees in adjacent areas of high urban use. And it would be reasonable to say that, you know, some of those are in the 1 in a million, some of those in the 1 in 100,000, some of those are 1 in 10,000. And so this was something that Professor Mark Stewart and I looked at. I posed the approach, and my answer was 1 in 450,000. And Mark came back saying, you can't be that precise, just round it off. it's a round figure, and it's statistically, a 1 in a million. It's almost not meaningful from a risk perspective. So you will find those trees. You may, as I say, go through an area where you find 3 or 4 because something's happened. But if you're going through a street tree inventory and the trees have been done the last 12 months, the likelihood that you're going to find trees of concern, that one tree, is even lower, because most of us over-sterilise, most of us overreact to trees.
Well, that's the thing with council. I mean, most of the time we do stuff not because we think it's a risk, because that's what the council specifications say. Like, we have a stupid thing of 40 mil deadwood in street trees, so which I therefore have to carry through to, car park trees, park trees, which is stupid. Look, that's what the council spec is.
It's not totally stupid, depending on the occupation rate below it. Again, I had to play with this just this week, trying to look at data, and 100 mil 4-inch branch came up, and Gemini's response was, well, this can occur and it's big enough, and the velocity and the mass, and it was playing with all those bits for me. And I said, okay, can you find me any records of one? And it came back, no, I can't. I said, okay, I'm going to tell you where to look now. In Hawaii, and in a condominium block, there was a 4-inch dead branch. I thought it was from a maple. It ended up being from a monkey pod. And it fell and killed somebody. I said, so I know there's one. And I know that a 4-centimeter diameter branch seriously injured a tree worker some time back. So in a perfect storm, yes. But remember that now we're not talking about hitting the human being. We're talking about a strike in that area there, which is, now a third of my body size. We're starting to talk a very small area of contact. And if it hits at either end, it's probably going to rotate. The energy is going to be transferred to rotational motion. So really what it wants to do is hit butt end first. And I know that can happen, but I also know that if I think about 360 degrees, about 1/3 of that 360 degrees may be a direct on point or butt end contact. The rest are going to be converted to rotational movement. Cut your scalp, some stitches. I know because I've been down to Mount Druitt Hospital and had those stitches put in. Broke a dead branch off. It came down my rope and hit me bang smack in the noggin, butt end in, and I'm still alive to tell about it. Now, it did travel along the rope, so some energy was absorbed, but I know that, had it hit elsewhere, it probably wouldn't have been as bad.
Yeah, well, if you talk about the opposite, you talk about people hitting trees, falling out of trees. The people have survived incredibly long distance falls. Yeah.
Yeah, look, and that's the other thing. And in preparing, so I've started to prepare the literature search and started to download papers for the revision of the thing. And I will be looking at essentially this centuries, whilst the NCIS, the National Coroner's Information Service, has been broadly available, looking at it. And I can tell you that the transference of risk to arborists to address tree issues, including land clearing and all the other things that arborists do, is an obvious higher risk than the trees that get left behind. Now, I'm not saying that the failures are the result of the trees, the arborists getting hurt as a result of the trees, but tree work is higher risk, and we seem to be happy enough to transfer that risk back to industry without a second thought. And it's just good to see that the number of fatalities in the tree industry are comparatively high compared with the number of people that are killed by accidental trees or tree part failure. And I suspect the figures would be somewhere the same. I just downloaded the database for the Netherlands. I've got it for New Zealand. The data tends to be somewhat similar worldwide, within an order of magnitude. So if if you took one end and the other end, pick the middle point, you're not going to be out by, much more than 4.5 times, something like that. So, we may get up to 2 fatalities a year, 2 fatalities in every 5 million. I wouldn't be concerned about it. I'd be concerned if we started seeing 20 or 30 fatalities a year. That would suggest there's a big problem. And from a risk perspective, a 1 in a million risk is already so small. The other thing that we've got to consider, and I will cover it in the paper, is I look at the life-saving health benefits. The literature just keeps on pouring out in that area. And I think it's reasonable to say that in most cases, more harm is done managing risk than is posed by not managing it. Now, the obvious ones, and I think, again, if you've not ever seen it, David Evans has a wonderful one-pager of obvious tree risks. Dead trees, splitting trees, trees wobbling in the ground, trees with nasty fruiting bodies. And so I think those things are the things that we as arborists need to be keeping our eye out on. Having said that, I'm notorious for leaving dead trees in schools and saying, look, it's a maintenance issue sometime the next 3 to 5 years. In most cases, the tree's risk from the tree has immediately fallen after it's lost its crown. After the leaves have dropped, there's less load. The bigger issue there is for the arborist, and I often say it's cheaper and it's better to get it done whilst it's still green because it doesn't shatter as much. And I have in my collection somewhere in the office, and if you really want, I'll go find it, not now, but for next one, I have a splinter that size of my finger that went in there and stopped there from a piece of dead wood that was being removed on a dead tree that shattered. And I had a visor on, it came round, spun underneath and caught me in the cheek and went right through and split the cheek in two. So it does remind me that dead stuff is brittle. But as arborists, we work with that. We do take that transference, and it's up to the client to decide when they can afford and what they can afford, rather than for me saying, oh, I would do that. And I have to say, I find it laughable. I would do that in 2 weeks. That dead tree needs to be removed in 2 weeks. And I think, I've seen dead trees that have been sitting there 30 years later. Did a whole school, Narrow Neck Lagoon at Pitttown. The trees were ring-barked in the 1950s. Most of those trees are still standing dead stags. So not saying that that's what you want to do everywhere, but it just shows you what you can do. Any questions or thoughts that have come out of all that? Was that a useful presentation in terms of showing you what we're talking about is not going to be an everyday thing?
I think so.
If you've done 500 kilometres of walking in schools, in other words, if you spent 5 working weeks assessing trees and you've found 20 tolerable risk trees, something is unusual. And just a reminder, is it my calibration that needs to be reset, or have I got an unusual set of circumstances? And I would say in most cases, we need to be recalibrated. Most arborists significantly over-assess risk. Now I don't expect it to be exactly, if you came out at that and you found 2, I'd say, well, don't recalibrate yourself because you're in a reasonable, if you found 3 or 4, I'd say, just watch yourself, don't go crazy. But if you've gone 500, 5 working weeks and you found 100 unacceptable risk trees, you definitely need to get yourself calibrated. You're way out in your risk assessment. And if you're using a qualitative system, so this is quantitative, if you're using a qualitative system, if you're finding trees that you think absolutely must have work done on them, that's in that essential or that even higher risk, that's that 1 in 5,000 probably, unless it's one of those odd things from a storm. And this is probably equivalent to about a moderate. if you're finding moderate risk. Otherwise, what does moderate mean? So, you know, again, if you'd walk that distance and you'd found 5 moderates, I'd say, okay, I get it. If you walk that distance and you found 500 moderates, then your moderate is really a low. And it lets you know if your moderate's really a low compared with the quantitative risk, then you can communicate that with a client. That is, this is compared with other trees, but this level moderate is already low enough that you may not even need to do anything. It's just elevated compared with the benchmark of the bottom end. Happy with that?
Can I ask?
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, you just did. Do you want another one?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to ask about calculating canopy density in bushfire zones.
You could use a crown densiometer if you wanted to. I'm not into bushfire stuff. I mean, every now and again I've got to do it because of it. The bail rating of a property. I struggle with the guidance being should, and every fire consultant reading should as shall, and not being able to vary things. And I think I've mentioned that before. I did one not so long ago. I'm happy to mention the town, Mulgoa, steel framed house, industrial steel framed house, so not the standard light mesh stuff, but from a commercial builder, with a metal roof. And the comment was, well, we can't have branches overhanging the roof because in a fire, what happens is those branches fall off and puncture through the roof. And my thought was, in a fire, the canopy is going to burn out the end. The size of the stuff that's going to fall is going to be less than a couple of centimeters. And if it can burst through a piece of bent corrugated steel in that situation, I'm happy to pay for the house. You know, it's just absurd. The fire consultant said, yes, but that's what the regulations say. I said, yes, it does. It says it should, not that it shall. And so you must bring to bear your knowledge in that situation. When I go out and see trees after a bushfire, I don't see massive big branches broken off. I see trees burnt to the ground. I see trees falling over. And, you know, if a whole tree with a metre diameter falls over during a bushfire because it's burnt out in the middle of the hollow and it's collapsed, it's going to go through any sort of building. And it doesn't matter how much it overhangs at that situation at all, because it's going to fall over. It's about its height and the distance from the building. And if you start removing every tree that could fall onto a building during a fire, I think you're better off just selling up and going and buying a Broken Hill. You can get really cheap land there at the moment. It's a good little place to buy, and you don't have to worry about trees because they've got virtually none.
Vicky, there was a webinar on stuff which comes out of Melbourne Uni, and they had a speaker a couple of weeks ago, if you can find that, who was doing his bushfire stuff. So I think they use linnear.
I've been doing this stuff. I just couldn't attend that one, but I don't know whether they have them available online afterwards or not.
I think if you emailed them, you'd be able to get it.
Yeah, thanks.
And then if you want to measure a thing called a crown densiometer is what's typically used to measure crown density. It's a little domed mirror. It's again not my field of expertise in terms of its application within the fire world. I just wish it didn't exist, but I do understand people building in those environments.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions?
Thank you.